Good evening, students. Welcome to the live virtual class. And today we are commencing the session. And today is our first session. That is, we are starting from the chapter 1, Nature, Object and Scope of Audit. And we are having a very learned and eminent faculty among us, CA Achal Jain, who will be taking you through the journey for the auditing subject. Students, please ensure that you are preparing your own notes. You are studying along with the classes, because whatever is being covered in the classes, if you have revised the same and if you have prepared your own notes and you're practicing the questions along with the session, then you'll be able to ask your doubts as well, and our classes will be like very successful, right? Because our purpose is that you are able to understand the subject, you are able to understand the questions and requirement which is being asked in the examination, you are able to write the correct and appropriate answer in the examination. And definitely, because this is the basic stage, at intermediate your base will be prepared, and whatever you will be learning at the intermediate level, definitely it will help you at final level as well. And after becoming chartered accountant, you will be the star of our profession, right? So our hope are with you that you are studying along with the classes and you are making your conceptual clarity, because conceptual clarity is very, very important. And please understand that auditing is not at all difficult subject. It's very, very easy, and we all do in our day-to-day life auditing, right? What we have, we have made our timetable or we have prepared our schedule, right? And thereafter, after completion of the day, when we analyze that what we have covered and what we were able to do and what we have done and what we should have not, where we should not do. So when you will be analyzing that situation, that is also audit, right? When we get the pocket money and we go to the market, we buy something, and after that we come to our home, and then we check whether how much we have spent, whether we have paid for the correct correct amount for the necessary things or whatever, like that is basically audit, right? When we were child, we were getting we used to go with our parents to the hotel or restaurant, we order, right? And when we receive the bill, we ensure that yes, whatever we have ordered is covered in the bill. Okay. And if something which we have not ordered, we come to the brought to the notice of the manager that please revise the bill. Or if something which we have ordered and not covered in the bill, that also will bring to their notice. So that is auditing and ethics. Okay. So today is our first class, and so for paper 5, auditing and ethics, we are having total 11 chapters. Schedule is being uploaded on the website, and we are having CA Achal Jain with us, and he'll be taking you through chapter 1. And don't hesitate to ask any question if you have. And this class is specifically meant for May 25 examination. So over to you, Achal.
Thank you so much, Karna ma'am, and good evening, everyone, for joining this discussion. As ma'am just mentioned that today we are going to start with our discussion related to audit. I also have some insights about this audit. I also understand some of your concerns and doubts around audit. Okay, so to begin with, before I really get on to our discussion for today, which is about chapter number 1, there are certain aspects around the audit which students generally carry in their mind, that audit is a typical subject, quite typical, and generally we have an understanding that this is more of a theoretical subject, which is not really true. And that is what we'll just plan to maybe discuss along with the topics that we are going to cover. That audit, first of all, is not at all difficult, or one should also understand the fact that this is not really a theoretical paper. Okay, or this is not really a theoretical subject. This is quite practical in terms of its application. At the same time, it is also quite relevant as far as this entire course curriculum is concerned, which is all about chartered accountant. Okay, so that is something which we are going to cover. briefly, though ma'am has discussed what is audit, we can just simply say in layman terms, if one has to understand, because I understand that most of you may not have really commenced anything as around any work related to a chartered accountant, related to articleship. Okay, so you may not be knowing at all about this audit. So audit in a very, very simple terms, you can say, is all about checking something. Yeah. For example, if anything is given to you and if you are required to check that, what will you call it as? You will call it as an audit. Okay, as simple as that. And when it comes to the paper number 5, which is audit that we are going to discuss, there again, one very important aspect which you need to understand is about the balance sheet, is about the profit and loss account. I hope that most of you will be knowing about this balance sheet, will be knowing about the profit and loss account. You will be knowing about the financial statements. Okay, so now when a company or when any entity, or let's suppose if any business house prepares a set of financial statements, which includes balance sheet, which includes statement of P&L, which includes disclosures, therein, when somebody is required to check that set, means if you are required to check the balance sheet, if you are required to check the profit and loss account, then what do you call it as? That will again be called as audit of financial statements. Okay, so this is briefly about what do you understand about audit. Now, in relation to audit, let's also try to get some aspects as to why is this checking important? Why is this audit really important? So again, if we forget for the time being anything which is technical in nature, anything which is about the financial statements, checking for any information is quite important. Yes or no? Yeah. Checking for information is quite important. Why is that important? Because if somebody has prepared any information, if somebody has compiled any data, then the person who has prepared, who is the maker of that information, may have made some mistakes. Yes or no? Why? Because some sort of human intervention may be involved. If you say that no, if let's suppose entire compilation, entire preparation of that information was automated, then there again, there could be some problems in the softwares, in the automation, which may result in some errors in terms of the output. Yes or no? Because of which its checking is important. And its checking will ensure that the information which has been produced, anything which has been prepared, is exactly meeting the requirements for which that particular information was prepared. Yeah. So again, in a very, very layman terms, that is how we'll understand the checking. That is how we'll understand about the requirement for a checking. Now, let's talk about the need for this audit. So if you look at a lot of companies today, okay, some of the large names which may come to your mind, say companies like Tata Group, companies like Reliance Group. Now, all of these companies prepare their financial statements. And there are a lot of stakeholders who are invested in these companies, who may be willing to invest in these companies. Similarly, there could be a lot of other stakeholders. For example, bank may have given a loan to that company, or maybe a company is approaching a bank for a loan. Similarly, there are various personnel who are having a stake in the company, for example, employees who are associated with a company. Similarly, there could be creditors, there could be debtors. All of these are what? They are all the parties who are transacting with that company on a day-to-day basis. And for all of these stakeholders, it becomes important to understand whether the company is producing the right set of information or not. And how will they get to know about it? One, of course, the company produces information, so any stockholder can go and look at that information, which is true. But what if a person is appointed and he has been given a task to check whether that information is correct or not? So what will happen? Will that increase the reliance on that information or not? Yes, over to you. If you can just share your thought process. So let's suppose if a company produces some information, okay, and let's suppose you are interested in that information. Maybe you are going to take some decisions based on that information. Now, one way is that you can just look at that information directly, which has been produced by the company. The other way is wherein a third person is appointed to ensure that such information is correct. So which out of these two you will prefer? The first one, which is produced by the company, the second one, which is produced by the company and checked by a third party? What do you think? Over to you. Quickly. You can just let me know your responses. Which one do you think? Okay, so Anirudh is saying second one. Hardik is again saying second one. So in respect of this second one, again, Rati Malini is saying second one looks better. I think same is the response from a lot of students. I am missing out your names. So that means that you agree that the reliability of the information will increase if a third party is appointed and that third party is given the task to check that information. Yes or no? Yeah. This is exactly what we call as audit. In case of an audit, what is going to happen? A third party is going to be appointed. And that third party will check the information. Now, what is going to be that information? We'll talk about. What all procedures will be required as regards that checking, we'll talk about. But first of all, we'll just try to understand that what is this checking? What is the need for this checking? How is this checking really going to help the company? And how is this checking really going to help the stakeholders? So we understand that this is going to help both the parties. Why both the parties? Because stakeholders will find that information more reliable now. And how is this going to benefit the company? Because if the information which the company has produced, and if that is checked or if that is audited, checked and audited is one and the same thing for the purposes of our discussion, then what will happen? Then in such a case, the company's information will have more takers. Means more persons will now be ready to take that information. More persons will be interested in that information of the company. And that is eventually going to help the company. So that is how company is also going to get benefited. So it's not only that the stakeholders are going to get benefited because of this. It's also about the entity which is getting that information checked. So they are also going to get benefited because of this. Yeah. Many a times you would have seen this. If you look at this practical scenario, so let's suppose if you go, I'm not sure whether you have come across this situation or not. So let's suppose if an entity, or if let's suppose you go to a bank, you ask for a loan. So what will the bank require? Of course, you will produce the information. Maybe if you are an entity, you may produce your information, you may produce your balance sheet. But the bank will require that such information is audited by a third party. Yes or no? Does it really happen or not? Yeah. So how is that really relevant? Anirudh is saying yes, this happens. Lakshita is saying yes, it happens. Great. So now why is that really relevant? Why? Because there again, the reliability of that information will increase. The bank will get more comfort on that information. Why? Because now the information which the bank is going to get will be audited. So he will understand that this information is something which has been checked by a third party. And how is this really beneficial for the company? for the stakeholders, for the bank. There again, as far as the bank is concerned, if the bank doesn't really trust the company, or maybe the trust factor is limited, that will increase. Many a times what may happen is some of the entities may want to manipulate the information. Yeah, some of the companies may be not producing the right set of information. So in such a scenario, what will happen? All those manipulations, all those errors, okay, which is a risk for the bank, and bank is what? Is a stakeholder. So all of those risks will be cut down. So we cannot say that risks will become zero, but yes, they will become significantly lower as compared to the situation wherein the information is not really checked by a third party. Yeah, so this is briefly about what do you understand about audit, say in layman terms, what is really the need for an audit, and how does it really help some of these stakeholders, including the entity which is providing the set of information. Okay, so if you have any questions, any doubts, you can just keep sending across your queries. I can see a lot of your responses, which is very good. And let's try to keep this session quite interactive. The more and more questions you'll ask me, and the more and more insights you'll share around this discussion that we are going to do, this will help us. Yeah, so this is going to help both of us. Okay, great. So now what I'll do is I'll just move on to this chapter. So we are going to discuss this chapter number 1, which is all about nature, objective, scope of audit. So now in this entire chapter, the discussion that we are going to have is all about basics of audit. Okay, now what do you mean by basics of audit? Means during the course of this discussion, we'll just try to understand various aspects around audit. What is audit? What is the meaning of audit? What are the objectives of audit? What is the scope of audit? If there are any limitations, if there are any advantages because of this audit, and if this audit is required to be done, what are some of the ways through which this audit can be done? Okay, so now these are some of the things that we are going to discuss during the course of our discussion. Okay, now as around this audit, let's try to get into a bit technicality. Now, what is this technicality? Again, you should not think that we are just trying to get into something complex. No, there's nothing which is complex. So far, whatever we have discussed, I'm just hoping you will not found this to be complex. Yeah, so same again is something that we are going to continue. So I can see this query from Pallavi before we really move on to this. Pallavi is asking, sir, if after checking by third party, there are errors present in the statement, then who will be responsible? Now, there again, it's a detailed discussion that we can just have as around this responsibility. But one should always understand that the primary party for the information will be whom? Will be the entity, will be the management. Okay. And if there are some errors which continue to remain even after audit, or if after checking, one will have to really understand as to what was the reason of those errors. If we believe that those errors are the one which may have remained even after the audit has got completed, wherein the audit was performed in a diligent manner. Yeah, now this is very, very important. Wherein the audit was performed in an appropriate manner. Then, of course, as around that information, only the management, or you can say the company, will remain responsible. But if there are some errors, or you can say if there are some loopholes as around the audit work, as around that checking, maybe let's suppose some information was given to you. Okay, you are required to check something. Okay, but you were quite casual in terms of checking that information. So what will happen? Of course, the person who prepared the information should have prepared that in a right manner, which is, of course, true. So that's why that person will, of course, remain responsible. But at the same time, now this person who was given the task of checking that information and who did his work in a right manner, he was quite casual in his approach, that person will also be now held responsible. Okay, so that is how one has to always look at in terms of the responsibility. But there again, as around this responsibility, we are going to have a lot of discussions in more detail as we move further. Hardik is saying, yes, sir, there are certain instances wherein you get to see this. Okay, great. Now, let's talk about audit. Let's try to understand as to how audit is defined. Audit, as we understand, is an examination of financial information. Okay, so we are talking about examination. Financial information means what? Means financial statements, which contain the financial information, which is all about balance sheet, which is all about cash flow, which is all about various notes to accounts, which could be there in the set of financial statements, and which could be related to any entity. So we are not really talking about a company here. So one should not assume that whenever the audit will be discussed, so it will always be discussed in the context of a company. No, that's not right. Okay. So which means that if it's a partnership firm, if it's a sole proprietorship firm, okay, or if let's suppose it's a LLP. So for all of these entities, audit may be required. Yeah. Now, whether those businesses are for profit or not, it doesn't matter. Irrespective of their size, it doesn't matter. Means whether the size of the entity is big or small, doesn't matter. Okay. Examination is something which could be required for any entity. When such an examination is conducted with a view to expressing an opinion. So what do you mean by this? Means when the examination is performed, after performance of the examination, means after the checking is completed, the auditor, who is the auditor? Auditor means the person who will audit, who will examine. That is what we call as an auditor. Okay. So that auditor will also provide some report. And in that report, auditor will specify his opinion. Now, what do you mean by this opinion? So auditor will specify whether the financial information shows true and fair view, whether that is true and fair or not. If that is true and fair, that is good for the company. If that is not true and fair, then there are some problems which the company needs to address and which the stakeholders need to know. So this is what you understand about audit. Now, for an audit, as we just discussed, that it's an examination. So you may always say that, sir, it's all about an examination of the financial statements. And after the examination, a report will be provided. Okay, good to understand. But in this case, a very, very important aspect which the auditor needs to understand and which everybody needs to understand happens to be the independent examination. So when we say examination, we also need to understand that this examination has to be independent. Now, what do you mean by independent? Independent, you can say, is a situation. Is a situation. Situation means wherein the auditor who is checking that information, who is examining that information, is free from any bias. He is not under any sort of pressure, and he will apply his judgment. He will apply his knowledge. He will apply his experience to the best of his abilities. Why? Because an auditor is expected to perform his work in a diligent manner. And when is that possible? Only and only when the auditor is independent. Now, what do you mean by independent? As we discussed, that it's a situation wherein the auditor is able to work on that checking, on that examination which is free from any bias. Okay. Now let's take an example to discuss about this independence. Now, what do you mean by independence? So let's suppose, say you are appointed as auditor of a company. Okay. Let's suppose you are appointed as the auditor of a company. Now, in relation to that audit, you are the auditor. But what do we find? That in such a company wherein you are appointed as the auditor, maybe your relative is involved in preparation of the financial statements. Okay, maybe your brother, your sister is the one who is directly involved in preparation of the financial statements. So now let's try to understand as to what will be the consequence of this. So let's suppose if you are the auditor of a company wherein your brother or sister is involved in preparation of the financial statement. So you are going to check that set of financial statements which your relative is preparing. So can you just give me your thoughts as to what is going to be the impact of that in that situation? What do you think? What is going to be the impact? Okay, great. Uttam is saying there will be a conflict of interest. What about others? Yes, quickly, over to you. Angel is saying there will be a bias. Okay, Anirudh is saying there will be a conflict of interest. Okay, Tanya is saying maybe some type of bias will be there. I can see a lot of responses. I am just missing out to this. Pranav is saying this will be a threat to independence. Dilip again is saying there will be a bias. Now, what is that bias? Bias simply means that in such a situation, what is going to happen? As an auditor, even though you will be doing the checking, but if let's suppose tomorrow some errors are found, then because your relative is working on that, so there is a chance that you may not want to report those errors, or you may want to just ignore those errors. Yes or no? You may just want to ignore those errors. Like Rachna just mentioned, that this will not be a fair audit then. This will be a situation wherein the work which the auditor will do will not be an appropriate manner. Why? Because you understand that you are not free from any sort of bias. Okay, so this is what you call it as threat to your independence, or a situation wherein you tend to be not independent and which is not permitted. Now, what do you mean by permitted? Means that is not something which you will call as proper audit, or that is what audit doesn't require, or that is where you will not be able to say that yes, you have done the audit, because you should say that you have not really performed an audit. Okay, so that is a prerequisite for you to audit. You have to ensure that as an auditor, it has to be free from bias. It has to be completely free from any sort of bias. And it's not only about bias, it should also be about free from any sort of influence. Any sort of influence, okay? Wherein any type of influence should not impact the outcome, should not impact the approach that you will follow for that particular checking. If that is the case, then you can say that yes, audit was done in a proper manner, wherein the examination was performed in a proper manner. Otherwise, it will not be considered to be a audit which is done in a proper manner. Okay, yeah. Now, some of the examples. Say, let's take this example. Say a CA has invested in shares of a company. Can he audit the accounts of such a company in which he holds shares? There again, answer is no. Why? Because in such a scenario, Tanya, Lakshita, they just mentioned no. It's no. Why? Because Shorya is saying it's against the requirements of the law, which is fine. It's against the requirements of the law. But what is going to get impacted in such a situation? In such a situation, independence of that particular CA will not be there. Why? Because he has got stake in the company. So that's why he will want this company to be presented in the best possible manner. Why? Because there is an influence. Yeah, there is a financial influence, there is a financial interest which this chartered accountant carries. Yeah. So all of these type of situations, one has to make sure that these situations do not exist. Only and only then the audit can be initiated by such a person. Otherwise not. Otherwise that will not be considered to be an appropriate scenario. Now, there are some of the points. Let's try to get into slight detail around this audit. Now, when the financial statements will be audited, okay, I'm just hoping you understand the meaning of audit now. Audit is all about checking, correct? Auditor has to ensure that these financial statements will not mislead anybody. Of course, yes, because he will check that. But how will he ensure that? First, he will have to look at the entries which are there in the books of accounts. He will have to ensure that financial statements have been prepared on the basis of the books of accounts of the company. The entries which are there in the books of accounts are adequately supported by sufficient and appropriate evidence. Now, what do you mean by this? If let's suppose sale is recorded, then there should be an evidence for that sale. What can be the evidence of that sale? Can you give me some examples? If let's suppose company has carried out some sales, what could be an example? Okay, great. Yeah. Great. Junaid is saying invoices. Very good. Nitya is saying invoices. Great. What are the other things which are possible in relation to sales other than invoices? Tell me. Great. Uttam is saying signed contract. Pavan is saying e-way bill. Great. Very good. Sai is saying, sir, bank payments. In fact, he's just trying to say it's all about bank receipts. Okay. So these are all examples. Shubhiksha is saying delivery challan. Very good. Yeah, vouchers. I think one of you mentioned vouchers. We'll talk about vouchers also. Okay. Amit is saying cash memo. Okay. Adishri is saying sales bill. Very good. Now, these are all examples of what? These are all examples of that particular transaction which has been recorded in the books of accounts. Now, whose responsibility is this? It's the responsibility of the auditor to check that the entries which are there in the books of accounts, they are backed by evidence. They are backed by some evidence. Now, again, that will depend on an entry to entry as to what type of evidence could be there. So again, we do not have any list which is available, and we cannot say that there's a standardized set of list which should be available for each and every type of entity and of course entry. Why? Because every time one will have to look at that transaction and accordingly decide as to what should have been the evidence around that. Correct? He has to ensure that the entries have not been omitted. Of course, means the proper entries have been passed. So one, he has to ensure that entries have been passed at the right amount and entry has not been missing altogether. Means there again, amount is correct. He has to ensure that the information which is conveyed by the statements. What do you mean by statements here? Financial statements. That is clear, unambiguous. Financial statements are properly classified, described, disclosed in conformity with accounting standards, and financial statements present true and fair picture of the operational results, of the assets, liabilities of the company. Okay, so in some of these points, basically what the audit mean to say is that as around that set of financial statements, everything should be checked. Okay. So I think it's a big list that we have looked at as to what should really be checked by the company. But let's now try to understand some of the aspects around the audit. Okay. And through which we'll also try to understand some of these points that we have just discussed. Okay. And while we'll discuss this point, okay, and I'm going to discuss a very, very critical point with you. That is what I believe. And with this part of discussion, hopefully you should also be able to understand that audit is not something which is theoretical in nature. Okay. And in fact, in case of an audit, there is nothing which is theoretical. It's entirely practical. Now, as we discussed, audit is all about checking something. Yes or no? Audit is all about checking something. Now, what is it that we need to check? We discussed that we need to check financial statements. Now, if anyone is required to check the financial statements, what would it mean? It would simply mean that the way financial statements should have been prepared, whether those have been prepared in a same manner or not. Which means that one needs to understand, if one has to audit financial statement, what is it that one needs to understand? One needs to understand as to how the financial statement should be prepared in the first scope. Yes or no? If let's suppose you are made an auditor of a company and you are required to audit the financial statements, but you don't know how the financial statements are prepared, can you really go and check that? Tell me, what are your thoughts? Over to you. If let's suppose you don't know as to how the financial statements are prepared, can you really go and check that? What are your thoughts? Omkar is saying, no, so sorry, I have been missing a lot of responses. Tambeshwari is saying no. I can see a lot of no. Okay, so now tell me, how do you really prepare a set of financial statements? You all are future chartered accountants, so I'm sure that you must be knowing about it. Okay. How do you really prepare a financial statements? So what do you think are the requirements to prepare a set of financial statements? Sure is saying schedule 3. Okay. I think somebody mentioned accounting standard. Yeah. Then Uttam is saying trial balance will be required. Great. Sarvesh is saying accounting standards will be required. Okay. Sai is saying it's a process of bookkeeping. Great. Kumareshan is saying trial balance will be required. All right. What else? For the preparation of financial statements, what do you need? Quickly, huh? Quickly, what do you need? So Anirudh is saying books and the trial balance. Okay. Ledger, I think one person mentioned ledger. Great. Pranav is saying cash flow statement. Junaid is saying all the records. Okay. So let me just put down some of the points. Huh? I think one information that you will require is the accounting standards. Means you need to understand about accounting standards. Yes or no? And I think somebody also mentioned schedule 3. Now tell me, for a company which will record a lot of entries, a lot of transactions, for that company, there are a lot of regulatory requirements or not? Is the company or an entity subject to various laws and regulations or not? Tell me. Yes. Great. Anuj is saying yes. And I think Vidya is also saying yes. Very good. So now, during the course of their transactions, I'm talking about that company or maybe any entity, huh? Is that company required to ensure that laws of regulations have been complied with or not? Yes or no? Yeah. So if a company enters into a sales transaction, maybe GST is required to pay. If the company purchases something, so there again, GST may come into picture. For the profitability of the company may have to compute income tax. Company may be required to pay income tax. Yes or no? Similarly, when the company will get into various contracts with third parties, so many laws and regulations will become applicable to the company. Companies Act will come into picture, maybe FEMA in respect of foreign currency transactions will come into picture. A lot of rules and regulations will come into picture, yes or no? Yes or no? So which means there are various laws and regulations which one needs to look at. So that's the third point. Correct? So we can see 3 points now. Now, when the financial statements will be prepared, if you talk about some of the large size companies, okay, let's talk about, say, a large bank which will prepare its financial statements. Let's talk about a very large company. Say, if we talk about Infosys, which may be entering into lakhs of transactions. Okay, so there are lakhs of transactions which this company will enter into. Do you think this company can enter into all of those transactions and record all of those transactions on a manual basis? Is that possible? Moni is saying no. Yeah, it's not possible. Muskan is saying no. Okay, so now what would this company need? Company would need IT support. Company would need IT systems to be in place. Because without the IT systems, company may not be able to capture so much information. Correct? Yeah. So all of these datas, there are a lot of working files which this company may prepare. So now as an auditor, if you are required to check that, if let's suppose tomorrow you are appointed as auditor of Infosys, so how will you check that financial statement? You need to know about the accounting standards. You need to know about those Schedule 3 requirements. You need to know about those laws and regulations. You need to know about the IT systems. Yes or no? And in such a scenario, what do you need to know? That all of these things, whether the company has applied that or not. As simple as that. Yeah. So which means that audit is what? Audit is all about application of all of those subject areas. All of those, you can say, disciplines which the company was required to take care of. So as an auditor, what do you need to ensure? That anything which the entity was required to follow, whether the entity has followed that or not. And how will you really do that? By getting to know, by understanding as to what was really required to be done on the part of the company. Yeah, only and only then you will be able to understand as to how the information was required to be produced, how the information, how the entry, how the transaction, how the contract was really prepared or entered into. Yes or no? So that's why when it comes to audit, one can say that audit is all about mixture. Yeah, something which you call as application of all of these subjects. All of these subjects. And that's why when it comes to audit, your knowledge as around all of those things become extremely important. Or you can say, if you know all of those things, then audit will become a cakewalk for you. Why? Because what do you need to ensure? You just need to ensure that all of these things have been taken care of. Yeah. So as far as audit is concerned, audit is all about ensuring all of those things, whether those are in place or not. Yeah. Clear on this? Clear on this? So that's why audit is also considered to be having a direct linkage with various disciplines, whether we talk about law, economics, okay, whether we talk about statistics, all of these things. Now, as an auditor, if let's suppose you are required to check, let's suppose if you are becoming the auditor of Infosys, so can you really go and check everything on a manual basis? Tell me, what are your thoughts? Do you think it will be practical on your part to do that on a manual basis? Smith is saying no. Gurminder is saying no. Great. Anjali is saying no. Sai is saying impossible, sir. That is not possible. So what is it that you will use? You will have to use some tools. And those tools could be statistical tools. Yeah. You will have to process some information again based on tools. What is that information? That is all about data. Yeah. So therein, all of these disciplines will come into picture. All of those things. Understood? Yeah. So that is where you need the application of all of those areas. And that is where all of these things really become important as far as the company is concerned. Otherwise, what will happen? If you miss out on any of these things, then what will happen? Of course, you will miss out on something as regards that checking. Yeah, Amit just mentioned, Amit saying, sir, advanced statistical tools should be required. Yes, and in fact, as you'll move further in course of your discussions, you will find out that in today's times, the technology is becoming quite dominant. And even in case of audit, the use of this technology has increased significantly. Okay, and that is really going to help the auditor. And that is something which is going to bring in efficiency in the work of the auditor as well. So that's why, as far as the audit is concerned, all of these factors become extremely important. Yeah, understood? Yeah. And any questions, any doubts so far? If you have any questions, any doubts so far, please keep sending across your queries. Any questions, any doubts? I'm just hoping everyone is clear. Okay, Ratimali is saying, sir, accounting softwares. Yes. Okay, Nitish saying, sir, I joined this class at this time. Should I attend this? Yes, yes, of course. So there's nothing as significant that you have missed out on. So it's absolutely okay. You should just continue with this. All right. So I'll just move further. I can just see some of the queries. Okay, so Hardik is saying audit and production means, see, audit and production means that, let's suppose if you go and manufacture if you go and audit a manufacturing company. Okay. Say, for example, if you are appointed as auditor of Hero Motorco, it's a manufacturing company. Now, in relation to this company, the inventory will be recorded in the books of accounts. Yes or no? Tell me, yes or no? So how should this inventory be recorded by the company? Tell me, what will become the basis for recording of that inventory? Hardik is saying AS2. AS2 is the accounting standard. But for a company, how should the inventory be recorded? Quantity produced multiply with the cost rate. Yes or no? So this quantity produced is what? Production. What if the company manipulates this data of production? Possible or not? Yeah. So that's why as an auditor, if you are required to check inventory, how will you check it? You will have to check the production records of the company. So that is where this production also becomes relevant for you as an auditor to go and check. And how will you check the production? Only and only when you understand the processes of production of that company. Yeah. So that's why, as regards the entity, each and every aspect becomes extremely important for the auditor, because till the time each and every aspect as around the entity is not understood, it's possible that there are some errors which continue to remain. Why? Because something may get missed. Okay, so that's why it again really becomes extremely important. Now Lakshita is saying, sir, how is this financial management relevant for the auditor? Yeah, Angel is saying, what is EDP auditing? See, EDP auditing is all about usage of this technology. Okay, again, we are going to discuss about that in more detail as we move further. As around this financial management, see, financial management is all about understanding of some of the financial analysis in relation to the financial information. Now, when we'll pick up this audit in the course of our subsequent sessions, you'll understand that there are a lot of audit procedures which the auditor is required to perform on the financial information, which involve analysis of data of the entity. And if the auditor is not aware of all of those analysis as to how can that really be performed, so can the auditor really do that work? Answer is no. Yeah. So that is how it is really relevant. Okay. Understood? Yeah. Any more questions? So I think the next question is around the behavioral science. Okay. There again, let's try to understand as to how this is really relevant. See, when it comes to an audit, so now what is an audit? Let's try to understand about this audit in a practical scenario. Let's suppose if you go and audit a company. So what does it mean? That you will just stay engaged in that financial statements? Tell me. The answer is no. Why? Because when you will audit the company, you will be interacting with a lot of persons. Now, who are those persons? Client personnel. You will be interacting with the finance team. You will be interacting with the CFO. You will be dealing with a lot of people in the organization, be it the production team, be it the sales team, be it the marketing team, be it the HR team. All of those persons you will be interacting with. And why is that interaction required? Because as an auditor, you will have to go and understand the processes of the organization. You will have to understand what are the SOPs of the organization. Yeah. Because if you don't really understand about the company, can you really go and check that company? Can you really go and check that accounting entry? So let's suppose tomorrow, if you are given to check the sales of a company, how can you check sales? First of all, you will have to understand as to what type of sales the company is entering into. Yes or no? Yes or no? So for you to go and check as to what type of sales they are entering into, you will have to understand their sales process. You will have to understand the nature of their business. You will have to understand the type of contracts they have been entering into. You have to understand the types of customers they have been dealing with. And how will you get to know about it? By interacting with the sales team. Yeah. So similarly, understanding of each and every process of an organization becomes extremely important for the auditor. See, if that is not understood, so what will happen? Auditor will not know what is required to be done. Yes or no? Auditor will not know. And when you will be interacting with all of these persons, yeah, so your knowledge of human behavior becomes important because you are going there as a checker. You are going there as an auditor. So you need to understand, maybe when you are interacting with someone, whether he is providing the right set of information, whether he's just trying to hide some information from you or not. Yeah. So all of these aspects become important for you as an auditor. And if that is not really understood by the auditor, then what will happen? Some of these things will get missed. Now clear on this? Yeah. Okay, Srinivasan is asking, sir, if an auditor audits a company which is new to his domain knowledge, how effective will be the audit? What can he do to get the audit effective and efficient? Like I just mentioned. See, you please try to understand that as an auditor, it is not possible to have the knowledge around each and every domain. Do you think it is really possible for any human to have this knowledge all across? Maybe there are a lot of sectors. Do you think this is really possible? Lakshita is saying no, that is not possible. Tanya is saying no. So how will you get to know about it? By discussions with the client. Who is going to be the client? The company that you are going to audit. So let's suppose you have a lot of experience in banking. Okay, let's suppose around the banks you have a lot of experience. You have spent 3 years in banking. And all of a sudden, you are given a task to say audit an IT company. Now, this IT company is new to you. This IT company is new to you. This environment is new to you. You don't understand a lot of things about IT company, significantly different from the banking experience. So how will you get to know about it? By discussions with the management. First of all, you will have to study this industry. Then you will have to study the company. How will you study the company? How will you get to know about the company? By discussions with the management of that company, by understanding the processes of that company. Okay, so when you will get into those discussions, when you will get into the understanding of the business or understanding of the processes, whether it is about sales process, whether it is about production process, whether it is about HR policies, all of these aspects, so what will happen? Your knowledge of domain will improve. Yeah, yes or no? Your knowledge of domain will improve, and that is when you will start checking that data or maybe that information. Because if you do anything before that checking, if you do any checking before obtaining that understanding, that what will happen? Your knowledge is insufficient, so your procedures that you'll apply may not be appropriate. Clear on this? Yeah. Yeah. So Shankar is saying one can know everything in something, but not everything in everything. And that's why for you to ensure that audit is done in an effective manner, you need to make sure that something that you don't know is understood first of all. Something that you don't know is understood first of all. And after that, you begin with the checking. Clear? Srinivasan, I am hoping you are clear on this. Yeah? All right. So we'll move further now. Now, let's try to understand around the objectives of audit. Though we have really talked about the objectives, let's try to discuss some of the technical aspects around audit. So now, as around the audit, what is the objective? To obtain reasonable assurance. So that's the objective. Reasonable assurance as to whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Okay, so now let's try to understand some of these terms first of all. Now, what is the objective of the auditor? To ensure that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. What do you mean by misstatement? Misstatement, you can say, is an error. Is an error. So auditor has to ensure that financial statements are free from error. Now, those errors could be intentional or unintentional. If those are intentional, what do you call them as? Fraud. If that is unintentional, what do you call them as? Only error. So what is the meaning of misstatement? In very simple terms, error. And those errors could be of two types. Moni just mentioned mistake. Very good. Yes. You can also call it as mistake. Okay. Now, once this part is ensured by the auditor that financial statements are free from mistakes, what is it that the auditor will do? Auditor will provide his report. Okay. Expressing an opinion means auditor will provide his report. And in his report, auditor will write that the financial statements are providing true and fair view. True and fair view will mean that significant errors are not there. Now, what do you mean by this significant? Significant means major mistakes are not there. Maybe small errors are there. Small error means errors which are of small amount. That is okay. That is okay. And that's why this term material has been used. In a layman term, you can just simply call it as something which is significant. Something which is significant. Okay. Yeah. Now, let me just ask you a question. Okay. So I have a very simple question for you. Okay, great. I think this was, in fact, the question of Nitish. So Nitish, in fact, I'm asking this question to everyone. Hopefully you should get this answer over there. Say there is a company which has a turnover of 100 crore. Okay. There's a company which has a turnover of 100 crore. And this company has a profit of 5 crore. Its sale is 100 crore, profit is 5 crore. And in its financial statement, there is an error of rupees 25,000. In its financial statements, there is a mistake of 25,000. Now, what type of mistake is that? You may just ignore that. Clear on this? Yeah. So we are saying there is a mistake of rupees 25,000 in the financial statements. In such a case, will you call that mistake as significant or not? What are your thoughts? Over to you. In this scenario, would you like to call this mistake as significant or not? Okay, they are suddenly saying no, sir. Ankit is saying not material. Great. I can see a lot of responses. Huh? Great. Rachana is saying it's a minor one, sir, not a significant one. The moment you say this is insignificant, what does it mean? Immaterial. Immaterial. Okay. Now, let me just change this slightly. Yeah. Let me just change this slightly. So what I'll do is I'll just give you one more example. And this is again very, very important for the purposes of audit. So currently we are discussing a very, very important aspect around audit. So now we discussed the situation wherein you mentioned that if the sales of a company is 100 crore, profit is 5 crore, therein mistake of 25,000 you considered as immaterial. Correct? Now, let me just change this fact pattern. Okay. So let's suppose there is a company having a sales of 1 crore. Okay. Now we are talking about the second situation. Company with a sale of 1 crore, profit of rupees 2 lakhs. Sale is 1 crore, profit is 2 lakhs. Now this company has an error of 25,000 in its financial statements. Okay. Again, error is 25,000. There's a mistake of 25,000. Now you tell me, would you call this as significant or insignificant? Over to you. Now I can see a lot of your responses are, and everyone is saying that this is significant. This is significant. All of a sudden you have changed your answer. Pavan is saying it is significant. I'm just finding it difficult. A lot of responses I'm finding. So Biksha is saying significant. Okay, so now can you tell me? Great. Amit is saying very much significant, sir. Okay, now can you tell me that in the first situation, you considered this error of 25,000 to be insignificant, whereas in the second situation, you considered this error of 25,000 to be significant. Can you tell me why this change for two companies making similar sort of mistake of the same amount? Why would you say that first company has made a mistake which is insignificant? For second company, you are saying the mistake is significant. Can you tell me? Can you tell me what is the rationale? Depending on the position. This is what Moni says. Okay, Palvi is saying, sir, because there's a change in the sale and profit. Okay, then Muskan is saying, sir, there is a huge difference in sale and profits of two companies. Yeah, then I think Arshdeep is saying, sir, because you will look at the proportion. Yeah, so I think one point which everyone is just trying to convey is the fact that all of these mistakes have to be looked at on the basis of size of the company. Size of the numbers means in the context of the financial information that you are looking at, you decide whether the amount is significant or not. Correct? I think same is the point from Ankit and Shaurya also. Yes or no? Yeah. Now, this is again very, very important on the part of the auditor to decide what is really material and what is really immaterial. And how do you decide something which is material or immaterial? That will be decided on the basis of the size of the company. Clear on this? Yeah. I'm just hoping everyone is clear. Huh? Why? Because it's only you who has answered this, and I'm just hoping, Nitish, that query. Yeah. So you are now clear. Yeah. As to what do you really mean by this material error or immaterial error. Clear? Clear, everyone? Yeah. All right. So now, so this was just one aspect of the audit. Now, in relation to audit, another very, very important aspect. So let me just touch upon this point also. Reasonable assurance. So we talked about this reasonable assurance, but we didn't discuss this reasonable assurance in detail. So we are saying that auditor will ensure financial statements are free from material mistakes. And then he'll provide his report. In his report, he'll write financial statements are true and fair. Okay. Great. Good to be understood. But now, how will the auditor do this? How will the auditor do this? Now, for an auditor, let's try to understand it. Let's try to think about it practically. Do you think that it is practically possible for an auditor to go and check each and everything which is there in the financial statements? Whether the company is small, large, medium, irrespective of the size. Do you think it is practically possible? So let's suppose if you are sent to audit, say any company, say for example, Zomato, you are required to audit. So can you go and check each and every record of that? Even with the tools that are in place. Do you think that is practically possible? The answer is no. Answer is no. Okay. Amrita is saying no. Junaid is saying no. Shatakshi is saying no. It's practically not possible. So in such a situation, what will you do? How will you audit? So let's suppose if you are saying no, sir, practically it will not be possible to check each and everything. So tell me, what will you do in such a case? Vanita is saying randomly we'll have to check something. Sai Charan is saying we'll have to just pick up some samples. Pranav is saying sampling. Very good. Very good. So now there you come. That in respect of audit, practically it is impossible to check each and everything. And that's why, what is it that an auditor is required to do? Auditor needs to understand his limitation. So this is a limitation actually. Yes or no? It's a limitation on the part of the auditor. Auditor needs to understand that there's a limitation. He cannot go and check each and everything. So that's why, what is it that the auditor will do? Auditor will check only the information on a sample basis. Now, what do you mean by sampling? What do you mean by checking the information on a sample basis? Say, for example, auditor will go and ask for the ledger of payroll. In payroll, let's suppose there are 1000 accounting entries. So auditor will pick up a sample. Say 25 entries he'll pick up, he'll check that. Okay. Now let's not ask me why 25 out of 1000. It's only a general discussion we are discussing. Huh? How do you really pick up the sample? What should be the number of the sample? What should be the sample size? All of these discussions we are going to do slightly later. The point is that the population that the auditor will pick up. Now, what do you mean by population? In respect of this payroll checking, the ledger which the auditor has obtained, that's the population. And the population is of 1000 accounting entries, out of which auditor is going to check only 25 accounting entries. Okay. Similarly, maybe the auditor is required to check purchases. So he'll ask for the purchase register. Say in the purchase register, there are 1 lakh purchases. There are 1 lakh entries. There are 1 lakh records. So how will the auditor check that? Can the auditor check all of those 1 lakh accounting entries, 1 lakh records? The answer is no. Auditor will pick up a sample. Now let's suppose that sample is 100. Let's suppose that sample is of 50 purchases. Okay, 50 transactions. Yeah. So there again, what do you understand? That the checking will be on the basis of sample. Vaishnavi has a point, sir. She is asking, sir, but what if there are some errors in the entries which are other than the sample? Okay, it's a very valid question. Huh? So she's asking, sir, you are saying that out of 1000 entries, auditor will check only 25 entries. So there are a lot of entries which he has missed. So let's suppose if there are errors in those entries which he has missed, so what is going to happen to that? Who will be responsible? Now there again, I think you will have to spend this aspect in more detail. As of now, you can just say that the way this sample will be picked up by the auditor has to be some reasonable way. Okay. And this sample has to be representative of the entire population. If the auditor has picked up his sample in a right manner, now what is that right manner? That is going to be a detailed discussion in our subsequent sessions. If that sample has been picked up in an appropriate manner, then the auditor will not be responsible for that. Of course, errors may remain, no doubt. It is absolutely correct. Nivetha also has the same point. Errors may remain. That is what you call as limitation of audit. That is what you call as limitation of audit. Means in an audit, this limitation will always remain. And that is why we have this reasonable assurance. Now this reasonable assurance, what does it mean? This means that auditor will write in his report that I am reasonably assured. Reasonably means he's saying I am not absolutely assured. Means he is clearly saying that on the basis of procedures which I have performed, which are based on samples, I am providing my assurance, which is a reasonable assurance. Now, please understand, reasonable assurance is not the 100% assurance. Means the comfort which is giving to the other party. So let's suppose if you are a person, you have appointed me as an auditor, and if you want me to go and audit, and I come back to you and I say, okay, I'm reasonably assured. So what does it mean? That I am not 100% assured. I am reasonably assured. Means there is some limitation. Okay. This limitation is going to remain. This limitation will always be there in the audit of the financial statements. You'll have to live with this. Okay. Clear on this? You'll have to live with this limitation. Yeah. All right. So now I can see some of the questions. Amit is asking, sir, none of the auditor can check in full. That is why statistical tools. Yes, of course. Monica is asking, sir, can we take last month of the year? See, there again, it's not that you will always take last month of the year or you cannot take that. It's like for sampling, again, there's a basis which the auditor will have to pick up. There's again a methodology, and it's a detailed discussion altogether. That is going to happen as we move further. Okay, in your subsequent sessions, you will get to know about this in more detail. All right. Yeah. Then Srinivasan is asking, sir, in case of Reliance, they have hundreds of subsidiaries, associates, joint ventures. Then is it possible for an auditor to get audited to audit the financial statements within the stipulated time? Yes, of course. Because for all of those companies, auditors are different. So you will not say that only one person is auditing all of those companies. Yeah. So there are a lot of persons who audit that information, who audit those companies. Okay. Let's suppose if you are given a task, let's suppose you are given a task, and if that task is big, so what will happen? Of course, a large team will be assigned on that project. Okay. So same is the case over there. Clear on that? Yeah. Nitish is asking, sir, will the auditor mention this in his audit report that I have done this work on a sampling basis? See, the moment the auditor write this reasonable assurance, which auditor writes in his audit report, it implies that the auditor has worked in a sample basis. Okay. Yeah. Clear on this? All right. So then this next question comes from Anirudh. Right. So Anirudh is asking, so SEBI or other market regulators, they put hefty fines on audit firms now and then, but in a way, auditors aren't complete remedy for the errors. So now this again, I would say is a separate discussion altogether. Huh? So there are a lot of debates, discussions around it. Yeah. So I am hoping that you have understood that there are, of course, the limitations with which the auditor will always work. Okay. Yeah, clear on this? All right. So then I think I have some of these questions. So Anuj is asking, so should the auditor also check huge amounts along with samples? So along with those samples, huge amounts will automatically get tested. Why? Because when the samples will be picked up, so auditor will always be picking up samples which are carrying all of those huge amounts. Okay, that is generally a methodology which is used by them. Rohit is asking, sir, what do you think that AI is going to help the auditor more? Of course, yes. And that is what is really helping the auditor more. This is already happening. This is already taking place. Ankit is asking, sir, reasonable assurance means it is not a guarantee financial statements are free from material misstatements. Yes, you are absolutely right that this it's not a guarantee. Okay, that's why absolute assurance is not there. Yeah, very good. Okay, now Preeti is saying, sir, what do you mean by internal, external? So we'll come to this point slightly later, Preeti. Moni is saying, sir, how can a sample be taken? So I think she's trying to ask that how can the final opinion be given based on samples? See, that's the limitation. Huh? That's the limitation. And there is again a methodology for doing this. Yeah. Then Veerbhadra is saying, sir, is there any specific method for selecting samples? Yes, of course. So I can see a lot of your questions popping up around sample. I would request you to, please put down your questions around sampling, please, because sampling again is a different detailed discussion altogether. We'll come to that approach around that sampling methodology slightly later. Huh? Otherwise, we'll just end up discussing this sampling only. Okay. Preetham is asking, sir, what is SA 200? I'll come to this SA 200. Okay. All right. So then I think Sai is asking, sir, AI will not have any ethical issues, so AI can replace. No. So see, AI is not something which is going to replace audit activity. Audit is something which is going to remain. AI is going to support that function. Okay. So what is the activity? Audit. For performing this activity, a lot of people are required. Similarly, tools are required. Similarly, AI can support. Okay. So that is going to be an enabler. So it's not that AI will replace this because audit is audit, checking is checking. Yeah. So the way this checking is required to be done, you can say maybe through AI, you can check that. Yeah. So please try to understand the meaning of audit. Audit means checking. Clear? Then I think Kumareshan is asking, sir, two auditor can do audit for one company? Yes, they can do this. Okay, Manju is saying this sample will help small, medium, large size. Yes, of course. Then Preeti is asking, sir, AI is something which has some minor error which cannot replace the auditor. No. So see, it's not about replacement of auditor. It's all about a tool in a way which is going to help the audit process. As simple as that. Okay. Niveta is asking, then auditor will correct the errors or just report that there may be some errors. So we'll get to this reporting requirements slightly later. See, if the errors are significant, auditor will report if those are not corrected. If those are corrected, auditor will not report. Okay. But if the errors are insignificant, auditor will not report. Fine. Okay, so now the next question comes from Sankar. He's saying, can an auditor give absolute assurance? No, not possible. Umar is again asking about sampling. I would request you to please park this sampling. Virbhadra, around this audit, will come to this discussion slightly later. Huh? Okay, yeah. All right. So now I think we can just move further. Before that, I can see this query from Princia. Okay, so uh, sir, what if there is a significant mistake in the books which is not picked in through sample, where CA has already stated audited? I think we have already discussed this, huh? That these are the limitations which are going to remain. So one has to understand whether the things were done in a diligent manner or not. If the things were done in a diligent manner, then of course, auditor cannot be held responsible. But if the diligence was not there, if right set of procedures were not performed, then of course one can say that the work was not done in an appropriate manner. Okay, but if the right set of procedures were applied, then of course auditor will not be held responsible. In such a case, management is somebody will be held responsible. Okay, so then I think this is the query where the name is missing. Sir, if the auditor cannot give absolute assurance, then how can the income tax be calculated accurately? See, income tax has got a different mechanism altogether. Okay, for computing that, you go and refer the Income Tax Act, and you are required to file your income tax return, for which the basis will be the financial statements. But of course, that's not the end. There are a lot of other things which you are required to apply as far as the income tax is concerned. Okay, so that's a separate thing altogether. Of course, one level of basis is there, but that's not the only basis. Understood? Yeah. All right. So again, I think some of your questions, which you are putting across, we are going to have this discussion. So there are a lot of things we are going to cover. So all of these questions will just put down. We'll discuss. Okay. Now let's quickly discuss about the scope of audit. We discussed that the scope of audit includes what? Various aspects of the entity. Yeah. Extremely important to get into a situation wherein the financial statement is reliable and sufficient, and to ensure sufficiency, reliability, you need to ensure four aspects in the financial statements. So what are the principles for recognition of financial statements, for the preparation of the financial statements? Can you tell me the principles of the financial statements? What are the principles which one has to look at in a financial statements? Over to you quickly. Yes, very good. Anuj is saying recognition. Nitya is saying prudence. Very good. So one is recognition. Second is measurement. Third is presentation. And fourth is disclosure. Now, please understand, where does this come from? This comes from the requirement of accounting standards. So even though we are discussing audit, what do we need to understand? We need to understand accounting standards. And if you apply that, you will get to know that all of these things are important. So if you can just ensure these things are there in the set of financial statements, so what will happen? The audit procedure will be considered to be performed in an appropriate manner. Okay. Yeah. I think Aisha also answered this. Asta also discussed about disclosures. Correct? Yeah. All right. So now what we can do is maybe we can just take a small break. Yeah. So everyone. Yeah. So we can take a small break, maybe of 5 to 10 minutes. So what do you say quickly? Yeah. And after the break, we'll continue with our discussion. All right. Yeah. All right, so let's take a break, and after the break, we'll continue with our discussion. Ajit, we can break now, huh? Ajit, we can continue. So I'll start. All right. Hi, welcome back. So let's continue with our discussion. All right. So we talked about the scope of audit as to what does it include. Now let's also briefly discuss as to what is not included in the scope of the audit. Okay. Though we have also discussed some of the limitations which remain. Yeah, we just talked about it. But there are some more things one need to understand as regard the audit. And please also understand that all of these things flow from that requirement of reasonable assurance only. Because audit is not about absolute assurance. This is extremely important for one to understand. Now, what is it that the auditor is not required to do during the course of his checking of financial statements? Auditor is not expected to perform duties which fall outside the domain of his competence. For example, maybe there are some assets with the company. So we are talking about tangible assets with the company. Okay, maybe they are not in a good physical condition. So auditor is not required to comment on that as to whether their condition is good or bad. Okay. Now, as around the civil structure, for example, it is not expected from an auditor to determine suitability and life of civil structures like buildings. Because this is not really the work of an auditor. Who is supposed to do this? Management. Auditor is only required to check. For example, when the management will determine useful life, how is that going to really become relevant? Because on the basis of useful life, depreciation will be computed. And that depreciation will be recorded in the financial statements. Okay. So as far as checking of this life is concerned, one can say, yes, that's going to be the role of auditor. But its determination is not the role of auditor. Okay. Auditor, once again, should not be considered as an expert in authentication of the documents. So what does it mean? So let's suppose there's a contract, there is an invoice, which let's suppose is not original, which let's suppose is fake. So auditor will definitely perform his audit procedures. But whether that document is genuine or not, is that something which the auditor is supposed to check? No. Auditor is required to ensure that all the accounting entries are backed up by supporting documents. But some of those supporting documents, if those are not genuinely prepared by the management, can the auditor be considered to be an expert to check their genuineness? Answer is no. This is not really the scope of the auditor. Then there is a big difference between audit and investigation. And I think some of you are asking me, sir, what's the difference between audit and investigation? Does the audit mean investigation also? The answer is no. Audit has got nothing to do with investigation. Okay. Investigation is a detailed exercise wherein the extent of checking could be significantly higher. Again, we are not sure. Now, again, let's not put across too many questions around investigation as to what is investigation. You can just simply say that, let's suppose a fraud is committed in the company. So an investigation may be required, wherein the procedures which will be applied, the checking, the extent of checking which will then be performed is going to be significantly different from what an audit is supposed to do. Okay, so that's why there's a big difference between audit and investigation. And that's why one should always understand that the scope of audit Why? Because if the scope of audit is not properly understood, then who is going to get impacted? Can you tell me? Over to you. If let's suppose scope of audit is not properly understood, tell me, who is it who is going to get impacted because of that? Over to you. Great. Kumaresan is saying company. Okay. Satish is saying auditor. Yes, very good. Because if the scope is not understood, then both the auditor as well as the auditee. Who is the auditee? Entity. Both of them are going to get impacted. So that's why, as far as the understanding of audit is concerned, yeah, this needs to be taken care of. This needs to be understood by both the parties. Only if this is understood by both the parties, it will serve its required purpose. Otherwise, this will become extremely difficult for both the parties to derive the required objective out of the audit. Clear on this? Yeah. All right. So now we have got some questions. But before I really get on to my questions, I can see some of the questions coming from your side. Let me just look at the questions. Okay, so Mohammed is asking, sir, please tell us if the auditor has taken money and do audit, is it correct or not? All right, so let's try to understand. See, what is an audit? Audit means checking. Yes or no? Who is required to perform that? A third party. So an entity will hire a person. Entity will hire a person for what? For checking. Yes or no? For checking. So for checking, auditor is providing a service to the company. Yes or no? For checking, auditor is in a way providing a service to the company. So if the auditor is providing a service to the company, should the auditor charge something for that or not? The answer is of course yes. Auditor will charge for that. Okay. And that's why the charge which the auditor will get will also be called as auditor's fees. Okay. Generally, this is called as auditor's fees. Yeah. And that's why this should not be free of cost. And what should not think that because it's an audit, so that's why it should be free of cost. Clear on this? Mohammed, clear on this? Yeah. Any more questions around this? Any more doubts if you have? Quickly, over to you. Any more questions, doubts? I think some of you are asking about this audit. Audit fees again. Okay, great. So now Preeti is asking, sir, can you please explain about this audit fees once again? Yeah. So what is an audit fee? Audit fee is the fee which will be charged by the auditor for performing that audit. Okay. Rati Malini is asking, sir, for checking the company accounts, the appointment is done by the company itself will lead to any problem? No, that will not lead to any problem. And we'll come to that appointment part also. In some time, we'll discuss that. Pavan is asking, sir, I think if he's asking the auditor take money from the auditing company, yes. Tisha is asking, sir, who can do the investigation? See, investigation is a separate thing altogether. Has got nothing to do with audit. Okay. Clear on this? Yeah. Okay. So now I think some of your questions are again are around the audit. Okay. And as around the applicability of audit, as around whether it's a mandate or not. We'll come to those questions slightly later. All right. So now Anshika is asking, is this internal audit? No, this is not internal audit. Let's try to also understand. See, what is an internal audit? Internal audit is all about checking of various processes, systems, which includes financial information of the company. You can say it's a wide domain, which is not really focused on the financial statements of the companies always. But the audit that we have been discussing so far is all about audit of financial statements of a company. And such an auditor is technically called as statutory auditor of the company. Okay. The auditor who audits the financial statements of a company is technically termed as statutory auditor of the company. Okay. Anirudh asking, sir, if an auditor finds fraud, is it his duty to tell the investigating agencies? Yes, there are some provisions in law which require auditors to report that. Okay. Poonam is asking, sir, that means immaterial errors will always be there in the reports? Yes. And which is absolutely okay. So you remember the example we took in case of a large company, if let's suppose there are small errors, does it really matter? No. Okay. Moni is asking, can a single auditor prepare financial statements every year for the same company? Now, please remember, auditor doesn't prepare the financial statements for the company. Can you tell me who prepares the financial statements for the company? Over to you, quickly, everyone. Who prepares the financial statements? It's the management. It's not the auditor. Auditor is only required to check that, examine that, or you can say audit that. Preparation is not the work of the auditor. It's not the responsibility of the auditor. Clear on this? Yeah. Preetham is asking around internal audit. Is it mandatory? See, again, that depends on the size of the company. In some of the companies, it is mandatory. In some of the companies, it's not mandatory. There's an applicability criteria, okay, based on the size of the company. Yeah. Okay. So now Pawan is asking, sir, if the auditor takes bribe for the company's auditing, is there any provision to take action against him? Yes, there are provisions because he will be considered to be unethical in such a scenario. Okay, he'll be going against his ethics. All right. Yeah. Then I think Anshika is asking about, Anshika, you can just please repeat your question now. Anuj is asking, sir, whether an auditor's report affect his fees? No. So see, fees is a separate thing altogether. Fees is based on the service which the auditor will provide. Service means the efforts which are involved. Let's suppose if you go and audit TCS, large size company, as compared to that, if let's suppose you are auditing a very small company, so your fees will be different or not? Yeah, because your efforts are going to be significantly different. Okay, so fees is always based on the effort involved, not based on the reporting. Anshika is asking, sir, statutory audit means procedures which each company is compulsorily responsible to get it done? No. Statutory audit means an audit which is mandated by statute. Which statute is that? Companies Act. And for which sort of entity it is mandatory? Companies. We'll talk about that in more detail as we move further. Okay. Soundarya is asking, so does an auditor get threats by reporting fraud? See, at times they may get that, but should it really impact the auditor? No. Remember independence we discussed? Auditors should be free from any sort of pressure also, any threats also. Okay. Dilip is asking, sir, is internal audit statutorily mandatory? As we discussed that for some set of companies, okay, there is an applicability criteria for this. There's an applicability criteria, okay? Not for all the companies, there's an applicability criteria, right? Mohammed is asking, sir, is Ind AS mandatory for internal audit? See, Ind AS is the set of accounting standards. Internal audit is completely different. So these two are completely different things. Vedant is asking, sir, if the auditor himself close to management, sorry, I've not been getting as to what is it. So I think you're talking about fraud. Maybe he is involved in the fraud. Then what will happen? Then of course he's going against the ethics. If found, he can be found guilty of that. Okay, legal actions will be taken. Okay. Vaishnavi is asking, sir, to whom auditor should report? See, again, the reporting requirements are there, which we are going to discuss slightly later, maybe when we get on to the reporting requirements. Ritika is asking, for audit, should we maintain notes or so see, it's up to you. It's completely up to you as to how do you want to approach this, whichever way you feel comfortable. Okay, Sai Charan is asking, as an investor, I blindly depend on the audit report, and up to what extent I can take the decision. See, there again, we'll have a discussion on this point specifically. We'll come to this. Anirudh is saying some companies are established by various institutes like LIC, RBI, etc. So their provision shall also affect the audit exercise. Yes, yes, that will have an impact because they may specify some of the reporting requirements on the part of the auditor. Okay. Then Satyam is asking, sir, if the auditor finds any misstatement in the financial information, should he directly mention the audit report or he will give a chance? See, first of all, if let's suppose some mistakes are found, let's try to understand about it practically. So first of all, what is it that the auditor will do? Auditor will reach out to the manager. Auditor will say that these are the mistakes I have found. And because these are significant, so that's why I want these mistakes to be resolved. If the management will correct those errors, then it is absolutely okay. If the management doesn't agree, if the management doesn't want to correct, and if the auditor believes those are significant, means those are material, then auditor will be required to report. Clear? All right. So I think now we can just move further. Maybe we can just discuss some case scenarios. And you need to answer this. I can see a lot of your questions, but all of your questions around some of those topics that anyways we are going to pick up. Okay. So don't worry. Lalji Bhai has purchased shares of a listed company on NSE. Audited financial statements of the company provide picture of healthy financial performance, having robust turnover, low debt, and good profits. On the basis of above, he is absolutely satisfied that the money invested by him is safe and there is no chance of losing his money. Do the audited results means this financial information. So some of you may be thinking about the results. So results means financial information. Okay, so that is how you can understand financial information. So do the audited financial information and the audit report of this company provide such an assurance to the investors? In this case, what do you think? Is the thinking of Lalji Bhai correct? What are your thoughts? Over to you. Quickly, Amirta is saying no, because it provides only reasonable assurance. Nitya is also saying the same thing. Then I have been missing out. So a lot of responses I am receiving. Very good. Junaid is saying yes, but sometimes. Pallavi is saying the auditor cannot give absolute assurance. So what do you mean by this? Means what is your response in such a situation? Rishita is saying no, he is not correct, as he cannot be fully dependent on the audit report as far as such a decision making is concerned. Vedant is saying Lalji Bhai's thinking is not correct because audit reports do not give 100% guarantee. Yeah. Raju is saying indicative analysis. So what do you mean? Can you please elaborate on this, please, Raju? Then I think Vishnu Vardhan is saying auditors can only give reasonable assurance. Yeah. All right. So let's try to understand this situation. See, when it comes to an audit, yeah, auditor is giving assurance which is reasonable. Means which is not absolute. Absolute means which is a kind of guarantee. Okay. Absolute is something which you can say wherein auditor is clear about each and everything. But over here, can we say such thing about the auditor? No. So even though the financial information is audited, yeah, of course, there's no doubt that some level of reliance can be placed on that. But can we say that absolute level of reliance should be placed? The answer is no. Yeah, because the investor needs to look beyond that. Investor needs to look a lot of factors as around taking such a decision. Yeah, as around the profitability, as around the future prospects, as around the industry, as around the future projections of the company. Yeah, so a lot of information about the company, which other than financial statements is also available, and these days it's available in the public domain. So all of these factors should have been considered by the auditor. Okay, only then such a decision should be taken. So that's why in this case, to say that the Lalji Bhai will completely depend on this information may be extremely risky on his part. Why? Because he's going to invest in this company. Yeah, so the value of this investment he may lose out. Yeah, so this is a big risk on the part of investor in such a situation. All right. All right, so let's look at some more examples. Okay, so let's look at this case scenario. Good Deeds Limited is engaged in business of recycling of waste from dumping grounds of Municipal Corporation of Indore to usable manure. It is in this way also helping to make the city clean. Okay. During the course of audit by Zoha and Zoha, a firm of auditors, it is observed by the auditors that the company has received a notice from Central Bench of National Green Tribunal for not following certain environmental regulations involving imposition of hefty monetary penalty on the company. Okay. So during the course of the audit, what has happened? It's been observed by the auditor that the company has received a notice, okay, for some non-compliances. There's a non-compliance, okay, which may involve significant amount. Okay, so it says hefty penalty. So significant amount is involved as a penalty. Company has not yet responded to this notice. Okay, so company is still in the process of evaluating as to how to deal with this matter. The auditors point out that this matter is not stated in the notes to accounts. Notes to accounts means disclosure. Disclosure in the financial statements. So auditor wants that such a point should be disclosed in the financial statements. Okay, so that's the contention of the auditor. However, company has got a different view. Company is saying that auditors are going beyond their scope of work. Okay, so it's a question around the scope of work now. Why? Because there's a disagreement between the auditor and the management. Clearly visible. Okay, and a lot of times when it comes to audit, you get to see this. Okay, practically this happens quite a lot. So let's suppose tomorrow when you will audit a company, you will get to see this quite a lot. So what do you get to see? That the view of the management and view of the auditor may be different. Now the question is, how do we resolve this matter? But before that, the question that currently we need to understand is that management is saying, forget about your view, you are going beyond your scope. Okay, so for the management to accept whether the auditor is saying right or wrong, first of all, what do they need to understand? Whether it's within the scope of the auditor or not. Okay, so now over this, what do you think? What are your views? Over to you. What is your view? Okay, so I can see some mixed responses. Akshara is saying, pointing out duties beyond scope is not a duty of auditor. No, so question is that is it really the duty of the auditor? Yeah. Ankit is saying this is beyond the scope. Okay. Venkatesh is saying it lies within the scope. All right. Tane is saying this falls within the scope because penalty is paid out of the profits. It will impact the profitability. Then Angel is saying it's not beyond the scope because there's a significant penalty. Then Muskan is saying it's within the scope. Vaishnavi is saying disclosure of financial information falls within the scope, but the question is that should this really be disclosed? Okay, that is also a question. Vaishnavi, yeah. Joy is saying it is in the scope as it is significant and also disclosure principle. Shreya is saying auditor has complete right to get all the information about aspects of business. Okay, Anshika is saying yes, sir, it is within the scope. Ritika is saying it falls within the auditor's work. Pallavi is saying within the scope. Panavan is saying no, it's not relevant with the auditor. So I can see majority of you are saying it's within the scope. Okay, but some of you have a thought process that no, it will go beyond the scope. Like Aisha just mentioned, it's beyond the scope. Okay, great. Vedant is saying it's within the scope of audit because the amount is significant. Now, please understand that all the disclosures we just discussed, remember this point? What does the scope include? Remember this: recognition, measurement, presentation, disclosures. Why? Because how will the financial statements of an entity be prepared? By ensuring compliance of all of these. Yes or no? Yeah. So if there is any disclosure which is missed out, is that a mistake or not? Whether that has been missed out intentionally or not, whether that's a mistake or not, tell me. If there is a disclosure but that has been missed out, is that a mistake? The answer is yes. Okay, so that's why, can the company say that it's a matter related to disclosure and auditor should not be looking at this? No. So the contention of the company is incorrect. It is very much within the scope of the auditor. Okay, it is very much within the scope of the auditor. Clear on this? Yeah. All right. So Srinivas has a query. Sir, in case of a company wherein the balance sheet audit fees payable is increasing and the company is making huge losses and size of the balance sheet is also decreasing, what could be the reasons for these and its impact on the company? See, as far as the fees which is increasing, the reason could be the increase in the efforts. Because why would one charge someone? Because of the services which are provided. And if the effort will increase, of course, the service charge will also go up. What is the fees? Fees is nothing but a charge for the service. Correct? Now, as far as the company making losses due to which its balance sheet is going down. So I understand by balance sheet, you mean to say the net worth. See, that could be because of various reasons. There are a lot of companies, maybe their business is not good, maybe it's a startup, okay, it's in the initial stages. So there could be a lot of reasons because of the losses. But just because the company is in loss, does it mean that the auditor should not be charging fees? The answer is no. Answer is no. Why? Because auditor is not charging any fee based on the profits. Auditor is charging fees based on the services he is providing, based on the efforts he is rendering. Understood? Understood? Clear on this? All right. So I think we can look at one more question. Okay. All right. So I'm just hoping everyone is clear so far. As far as scope, objective, approach, all of these things are concerned. Hope you're clear on this. Yeah. All right. So Afzal has a doubt. He's saying, sir, generally a querying company will have a certain limit of digging the ground. If they are going beyond their limit and it is coming into the knowledge of the auditor while auditing, does this come within the scope of the auditor question whether they are going beyond the government prescribed limit? See, as far as the audit of financial statements is concerned, anything which will have an impact on the financial statements will fall within the scope of the audit. That is how you should consider that. Okay. So anything which will have an impact on the financial statements will fall within the scope of the auditor. That's how one should understand. Clear on this? So let's look at this example. A huge fire broke out in Noida plant of KT Limited. Plant assets comprising building, machinery, and inventories were insured from the branch of a public sector insurance company. Okay, so the assets of the company. Okay, assets of the company. What were the assets? Building, machinery, inventories, all of these assets were insured. Yeah. Apart from an insurance surveyor who was deputed for assessing the loss due to fire, regional office of the insurance company, insurance PSU means insurance company, also appointed a chartered accountant for verification of books of accounts and financial records of this company. Which company is this? KT Limited. So what has happened? There's a fire which has taken place. So insurance company from which the insurance was taken. So this company has deputed two parties. One is a surveyor who will go and do his survey as around the loss. Okay, so whenever there is such loss, insurance company will depute a person who will go find out what caused the fire, what were the damages, all of these aspects that surveyor will look into. But other than that, this company has also deputed a chartered accountant. What is the role which is assigned to the chartered accountant? Go and verify the books of accounts of the company. Go and verify their financial records. And also find out the circumstances surrounding the loss, means as to why the fire has taken place. Okay. And this chartered accountant was also requested to submit an early report. Means once the work is completed, he is also required to produce a report. Of course, the report will have to be provided. If some task is assigned, then of course, report is required to be given. Now the question is, would the report by this chartered accountant be considered as an audit report for the purposes of our discussion? Yeah. So some of those things that we have been discussing as far as statutory audit is concerned, should this report be considered equivalent to that? Should this scope be considered as similar to that? Ritika is saying, I don't think so. Anchika is saying no. I think Shatakshi is saying no. Then Lakshita is also saying no. Suvendu is saying no. Anuj is saying no, sir. It's a verification report. Okay, what about others? Asta is saying yes, sir. Report by CA is in the nature of audit report. Auditing is the basic tool of assessing the financial statements. Okay, Deepdas is saying yes. So I think some of you are saying yes. Most of you are saying no. Then Uday is saying yes. Gurvinder is saying yes. Okay, great. Can you also explain the reason for yes? Because most of you are not giving the reason. You are just saying yes or no. It's good if you can just elaborate also. Amit is saying no, sir. It's not an audit report because it is basically investigation in nature, which arises due to uncertain event. There is a natural calamity. Okay, then I think Shambhavi is saying no. Joya is saying, sir, as far about financial record, is CA nature work but not circumstances? I can't really understand. Maybe, I'm missing out something. Vaishnavi is saying no. Pavan is saying, sir, it will not be an audit report as the CA is appointed by the insurance company. I think it should be considered to be a third party to an audit report. All right. Dal Singh is saying it's an interim report. Vedant is saying it's an investigation report. All right. So let's try to understand about this. See, in this case, there's a special purpose because of which this appointment of CA as an auditor has taken place. Okay. Further, the chartered accountant, over and above the verification of books of accounts, over and above verification of financial records, has also been asked to do something which is non-financial in nature. Can you tell me what is the scope of the chartered accountant which has been assigned to him? Quickly, is it really limited to the examination of financial information? Yes. Let me see who can answer this. Over to you quickly. Let me see who can answer this. Anirudh is saying no. Pranav is saying no. Then what is it that the chartered accountant has been asked to do? VR is saying circumstances surrounding is beyond scope. Anirudh is saying he has been asked to find the reason for the loss. Okay. That is what the problem is. That is what the problem is. See, it's a specific purpose checking. It's a checking for a specific objective. You can say for a special purpose, wherein CA will be required to do two things. One is verification of books of accounts. Second will be to get into the circumstances which are surrounding the loss. Okay, that's why it should not really be considered as an audit. Why? Because the scope goes beyond the audit. Tell me one thing, that to know the reasons because of which the fire has taken place, does it have anything to do with the financial statements of the company? Tell me, over to you. No, correct? Yeah, it's no. So that's why whenever such scope will be assigned to a person, can you call that as an audit work? The answer is no. That means we are going beyond audit. You can just call it as a kind of investigation, or you can just call it as maybe any sort of work, but that cannot be considered to be really limited to audit. So that's why in this case, the report which the chartered accountant will provide, can that be considered to be an audit report? No. Why? Because as far as the audit report is concerned, what do we understand? That audit report is all about providing reasonable assurance that the financial information is true and fair or not. Yes or no? Yeah. So that is what the report is supposed to provide. But in this case, the report will go beyond that. The report will also cover a lot of other aspects which are not really limited to what the report provides or something that we have really looked at. Okay. Yeah. All right. So now before I really move further, I think some of you may be quite new as far as this audit is concerned. Some of you may not be knowing really about as to, what is this audit is all about, how this audit report is really required to be produced. So maybe what we can do is we can just look at one audit report just to get a feeler, okay, as to how this audit report really looks like. Though we are going to spend more time on that audit report, on the reporting requirements, how that report is required to be really dealt with, okay, as we progress in terms of our discussions later on. But idea is to just give you maybe a feeler, as to how this audit report really looks like practically. So what I'll do is I'll just share one audit report with you. Okay. Yeah. So this is how an audit report will look like. Okay. So the report which you can see is the real report. So we are looking at the report of Airtel. Okay, so that is for the financial year 23-24. So now report has to be provided by the auditor in an independent manner. So that's why in this case, what do you find? It says independent auditor's report. Independent auditor's report. Yes or no? Yeah. Secondly, as around this report, there could be a lot of components, there could be a lot of items. So let's not get into the technicalities of all of those items, all of those things which are there in the audit report. Idea is just to give you an aspect or just to give you a feeler as to how the audit report really looks like. And after this audit report, okay, so this is all audit report. So we are just continuing with the audit report. So audit report will be signed by the audit partner once we are through. Yeah. So after this audit report, what you will get to see is the set of financial statements. Means whenever audited financial statements are provided, the first thing that should be there in that set should be the audit report. Can you see that we had this audit report to begin with? And this is followed by the financial statements. Financial statements were not there at the first place. At the first place, what is it that will be provided? Audit report. Why? Because this is the first level of comfort which any third party would want to look at. Yeah. And that's why whenever an audit report is provided, along with audit report, financial statements are annexed. Financial statements are annexed. You can say they are attached with that. They will follow the audit report. Okay. And then you will have this complete set of financial statements. Okay. All of these things. Yeah. So again, I'm not getting into too much technicality. Idea was for you to just look at as to how this audit report really looks like or what is really an audit report. Okay. So it's a kind of report. It's a written report, or you can say a written document by the auditor, and which is also signed by them. Okay, so as you can see, at the end, it will be signed by the auditor. Over here, it is signed by the auditor. On this, in this case, you don't see the signature. Why? Because it's something which is printed. Okay, but when it is printed, it's taken in hard copy, therein it is also signed. All right, clear on this? All right, so let me just come back and let's continue with our discussion. I think one of you was asking for the solution of this question number 3. Sure, let me just go to the solution. And in the meantime, I can also see some questions popping up. Okay, so Amrita is asking, sir, if the question was up to the verification of books of accounts or the financial records, should we then say that this report will be in the nature of the audit report? Yes. Then we can say, because it's all about audit of financial information then. Though it will still not be considered to be a statutory audit. It will be considered that to be as a special purpose audit. But special purpose audit again is that of the financial information. That's why we can then call it as an audit report. Okay, so I would say a very good question raised by Amartya. Okay, Aisha is asking, sir, when do we prepare audit report? So whenever we audit the financial statements, so we provide a report. That is what we call as audit report. Remember expression of opinion. Aisha, remember we discussed expression of opinion. Therein we discussed that how do you express the opinion? In the form of a report. In writing, you are required to provide this. Okay. All right. So Pallavi is asking, sir, can a company change auditor for every year? See, as around the appointment, I'll come to this part slightly later. Okay. Yeah. Then I think Gondi is asking, can a CA do the investigation? Yes. See, investigation is separate scope, separate work altogether. If you'll say that, can a chartered accountant do that? Yes, if he is capable enough, if he has got that competence which is required in that respect, of course he can do that. Okay, so it's like any other service. Huh? So important thing is to check the competence. If the competence is there, yes, it can be done. So Biksha is asking, any report by an auditor is an audit report? Is it not? Not really, because you'll have to understand what type of audit is performed. Okay, what type of audit is performed? That is how you need to look at it. All right. Yeah, clear on this? Okay, so I can see a lot of questions coming up as around the appointment, as around the applicability. So let me just touch upon those aspects now, as around the audit, whether it is mandatory or not, and as around the appointment also. Now, as far as the audit of the financial statements is concerned, okay, it is not mandatory always. Now, here again, one will have to understand the type of entity it is. See, when it comes to a company, so if you talk about a company in India, for a company which is registered in India, audit is mandatory. Where does this mandate come from? Companies Act. Companies Act. Okay, Companies Act mandates audit of financial statements of each and every company. Okay, means every company in India will have to get their financial statements audited every year. And what year will that be? Financial year. Clear? Yeah. Now, when it comes to non-corporates, now what do you mean by non-corporates? Non-corporate means partnership firm. It could be an LLP. It could be a proprietorship. It could be a trust. It could be a society. Yeah. So now all of these non-corporate entities, for them, there is no mandate for the audit. Yeah. But for them, the applicability of the audit may arise from various other applicable statutes. For example, income tax. Now, depending on the turnover of the company, income tax may mandate audit of that company, or audit of that partnership firm, or audit of that proprietorship firm, audit of that LLP. Okay, so we are saying that various statutes which are there, various regulations which are there, one will have to look at those statutes or regulations in respect of non-corporate entities. But to say that for each and every non-corporate entity audit is mandatory, answer will be wrong. Okay, clear? So which means that in India, audit is mandatory for each and every company. But for non-corporate entities, one will have to look at the applicable rules and regulations, or you can say the laws and regulations. One of them which commonly is looked at happens to be income tax. Yeah, because income tax may mandate depending on the turnover. Yeah, so that is how this is generally required to be looked at as far as the mandate is concerned. Now, next comes the point that, sir, if the company wants to get its financial statements audited, even though it is not mandatory, so is that okay? Yes, absolutely okay. There's absolutely no problem in doing that. Okay. So if the company would want to get its financial statements audited, sorry, if let's suppose there's a society, if let's suppose there's a trust, say for some reason audit for that entity is not mandatory, and this entity wants to get its financial statements audited voluntarily, can it do that? Answer is yes. There's absolutely no problem in doing that. Okay, clear on this? Now comes the question as around the appointment of the auditor, because I could see a lot of your queries as around the appointment. Now, who will appoint the auditor? Now, here again, you will have to understand that this question is quite wide. Okay, and its applicability will again be dependent on the structure of the entity. Now, here again, let me just break it into few parts. So if you look at the companies, who will appoint the auditor? Members of the company will appoint the auditor. For companies, who will appoint the auditor? Members. In case of government companies, auditor is appointed by CAG. Now, what is CAG? You can say it's a government body. Its full form is Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Very commonly, it is called as CAG. So in case of government companies, who will appoint the auditor? CAG. In case of non-government companies, who will appoint the auditor? Members of the company. Now, let's talk about non-corporate entities. For example, say there is a partnership firm. Say there is a partnership firm. Now, in this case, because the audit is not mandatory, so that's why who will appoint the auditor? It will be the owners of the firm. It will be the owners of the firm. Who are the owners of the firm? Who are the owners of the partnership firm? Tell me quickly. Over to you. In case of partnership firm, who are the owners? Yes, over to you. Who are the owners? Partners. Very good. Yeah. Anjali is saying partners. Karan is saying partners. Very good. Great. So now, in this case, who will appoint the auditor? Partners of the firm. Yeah. So again, depending on the type of entity it is, appointment of auditor will happen. But I think for our purposes, the most common aspect as far as the appointment is concerned should really be limited in the context of a company, wherein the appointment again has to be divided into two parts: government company, non-government company. For government company, it's always CAG. For any company which is other than government, it's members of the company. That means the shareholders. Shareholders. All right. Clear on this? Yeah. So maybe what we can do is maybe we can just hold our discussion for today over here. And let me just come to your questions, doubts that you may have. Yeah. But please remember that we are not yet done with this topic. And of course, audit is all interconnected. Even though this is all divided into various chapters, during the course of our discussions, you will find that audit is all interlinked to each other. Okay. So a lot of topics that you are going to cover maybe in subsequent sessions, you will find a lot of similarities in relation to what we have discussed. Okay. Clear? All right. So now let me just come back to your questions and doubts, and then we'll end our discussion. All right, so I can see some of your queries. Okay, so Mohit is asking, sir, why is our paper named Audit along with Ethics? Because it also talks about ethics. So this is again one of the things that you are going to cover maybe subsequently. Angel is asking, Comptroller means, see, it's a body. Okay, so that's the name of the body, Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Anchika is asking, sir, how many days will it take to complete audit? So I think there's a detailed chart which must have been circulated to you. It will take some time. Yeah, but my request to everyone, though we have completed our discussion, but please remember some of these points that we have discussed. You need to just make sure that you have revised this before we meet next. It's extremely important. And you must have found that there are a lot of things that we have discussed. These are not really theoretical in nature. These are quite practical in nature. Okay, so that's why if you come after revision of all of these points, you will find that the remaining part of this chapter that we cover, okay, you will be able to understand that in a easy manner. Otherwise, some of these things, if you will forget, then you will find maybe, disconnect in terms of our discussion as around that part. Okay, so Pallavi is asking about the notes. See, of course, all of these discussions as around the presentation that I've been discussing, okay, this has been cut down in the form of short notes. So this will be shared with you. You can, of course, use this as a note for you. But if you want to take your separate notes, you can always do that. If you want to just underline, if you want to write down your short notes, whichever way you feel comfortable, you can do that. From of course, our side, this presentation, which is, in a summarized manner, prepared as around some of the topics that we are going to cover will be shared with you. So again, of course, use this as part of your notes. Okay, so Uttam is asking, sir, how the notes will be shared. So I understand maybe the concerned audit team will let you know as to maybe this is uploaded on the portal from where you can access this. Mohammed is asking, sir, a lot of people are asking audit is hard and of course, so I think you have got this insight. This is not at all hard, not at all tough, which I believe that you have also been able to understand today. So if you'll just find ways to connect all of these topics in a practical manner. Okay, all of these topics around the audit, if you'll find ways to connect that in a practical manner, then this will become easier for you. But if you'll not do that, then of course you will find this to be quite theoretical in nature. Yeah. Okay. Then I think Anuj is asking, sir, which Indian government, who audits Indian government receipts and expenditures? See, of course, for each and every audit, there is a separate auditor who's appointed. Okay. And in respect of the government companies, it's all appointed by the CAG. Okay. Then I think I have this question coming up from Mohammed. He's asking, sir, from where I can find. I think I just couldn't understand this part completely. So there are a lot of responses I'm receiving. I'm just missing out on those responses. Very, very difficult to track your chat. Any more questions around the topic that we have covered? If you have, please let me know. Otherwise, we can just conclude our discussion for today. I think one question was around, can only a CA audit? See, when it comes to the statutory audit, okay, for example, we discussed that audit of the financial statements of a company. Okay, so in this case, of course, it's a mandate which is given only to a chartered accountant. So in India, for a company, audit of financial statements can be performed only by a chartered accountant, nobody else. Yeah. Anirudh is asking, sir, if the auditor cannot give reasonable assurance, see, auditor is required to give reasonable assurance. Okay, there could be some mistakes, errors, and if the auditor believes that no, he has not been able to find things in the financial statements, a basis which he is unable to express his opinion, then he'll have a reporting implication. So when you will cover this audit report aspect, therein you will find this understanding as around what are the implications, what is it that the auditor will report. Okay. Then I think Preetham is asking, sir, what is the deadline for the company to complete audit for? See, the deadline is for a financial year, within 6 months, company has to convene this AGM. Okay. And in the AGM, financial statements are required to be presented and which has to be audited. Okay. So that in a way becomes the timeline also. Okay, VR is asking, oh, sorry, I've been missing. Mohit is asking, sir, would you take the lectures as arranged in the sequence of the study material? Of course, yeah, that is the sequence will follow. See, in the sequence of study material, I would say, yes, of course, sequence will be arranged in the manner the chapters will go on. But yes, within the chapter, maybe one of the topic we can pick up earlier, one of the topic we can pick up later. Yeah, so that part will just do. Then Aisha is asking, after preparing the financial statements, then only audit will be done. Of course, yeah, because that is what is required to be checked. If the financial statements will not be prepared, how will the auditor check it? Okay. Then I think I missed out the name. He's asking, can you just help us with the notes so that we can just take down in a structured manner? See, like I mentioned, that this presentation will be shared with you. It's quite structured as far as these notes are concerned, but of course you can just note down in your in the way you feel more comfortable. That is how you should be doing this. Swati is asking, sir, if in case management is required to change the auditor, then is it possible? Yes, of course, management can always change that. Okay. So of course, but for the year for which the auditor is appointed, auditor will have to report. Okay, next year, of course, the auditor can. Generally, the appointment is for 5 years. Okay, that's how it really works now. The appointment is for 5 years, and the next appointment will be after 5 years. But before 5 years, if the management wants, they can change that. If the auditor also wants to leave, he can leave that. Okay, but 1 full year he has to complete. Aisha is asking, after signature by the auditor, will it show on the website? Again, depends. In case of a listed company, you will get to see their financial statements, which is part of the annual report on their website also. But in case of unlisted companies, in case of private companies, it's not available on the website always. Okay. Yeah, so I think Swati is done. Sapna is asking, sir, are the auditors hired by the companies accountable to see? As we discussed, that auditors are appointed by the shareholders. So the report which the auditor will provide, this will go to the members of the company. Okay, this will be addressed to the shareholders of the company. Administratively, it's the management that is working with the auditor, but auditors are required to report to the members. That's how it works. Okay, and this is again, you are going to discuss in more detail. See, I can understand you have a lot of questions as around audit, and it's so wide. It's good to find you have a lot of questions, but please understand there are a lot of things around audit that you are going to cover in your subsequent sessions. So most of your questions will automatically get answered once you're through with this. All right. Then I can see a lot of questions around notes. I think I have answered this. Anuj is asking, what is the process of audit? So this discussion that we had today is all about process of audit and some more things that are going to follow. Then I think Lakshita, I'm just missing out on, she's saying that she has understood each and everything. Very good. Then Anshika is saying, I want to appear for module 2. See, as regards this preparation, etc., I think maybe you can have a separate detailed discussion. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. All right. So thanks once again for your time and for the wonderful participation that you have shown today. It was really encouraging and it's very good that all of you have participated in such a manner. It's great and let's hope it continues. So I think we can just wind up our discussion for today with this. But please remember that you need to just revise before we meet next. Yeah. So thanks once again for this participation. Great. Thanks so much. Yeah. Jeet.
Recording stopped.